All right, so I'm here today to share actually my second book in this series, which you might recognize from the cover design. They're very consistent about this cover design. These are really hyper-local history books, and specifically telling local history stories of neighborhoods or small towns through photographs, which I find to be a fascinating way to tell local history stories. And one quick, I will tell you that I have no text, I just have pictures. It sort of suits the book. My friends and family tease me that I haven't actually yet written a real book. These are picture books. Not as many words as I might like to take credit for, but still an effort. All right. So I want to start with a little bit of a story about this being my second book. This Lincoln District, which is where I live, and this is a picture sort of situating it. We are looking towards the top of this picture at Commencement Bay in downtown Tacoma. Just south of that, you see Lincoln High School is the major building in the center of the photograph. And this is a photograph of an older period of time in the district when a lot of land that's now developed was still undeveloped. But what I like about this photograph, this is from the 1940s. War era, and it shows just how close this area is to downtown Tacoma, how central it is to this city. It's very similar in that way to the Stadium District, a residential neighborhood that's very much connected to the center of town. And I had a little battle with the publisher to get this book published. This was my first proposal to them back in 2014. And their response was, this is a low-income neighborhood. We don't see that you'll sell any books. So are there any other books you might like to write for us? And we'll see how you do, and then if you do well, we'll let you write another one. So I published a book in 2015 in this same series about our theater district, which was a fascinating project, and I loved doing it. And it was a great experience. But this neighborhood and this story remained my true passion. So finally won that little battle and got the chance to put this together. So I'll just quickly take us through some photographs. Some of which are in the book, some of which aren't. What's interesting to me about this story is that there are income discrepancies in Tacoma that do lead to certain neighborhoods being seen as more significant or important or valuable than others. And when I look back at the history of this particular part of our city, there are some reasons why the neighborhood went the direction that it did. And a lot of them can be discovered through looking at photographs. So the first discovery I made in my research is that the neighborhood is not named after Lincoln High School, even though it has been there since 1913. It's named after Lincoln Park, which in its day was almost on the scale of Point Defiance Park in its size and grandeur. But decisions were made over the decades to take land away from it for other purposes for the community. And this park actually was originally called South Park. It's south of downtown, right? Long before the cartoon. But just, let's just set aside some land for a park in the south end of town. Renamed after Lincoln in a surge all over the country of renaming things after Abraham Lincoln in the 1890s and early 1900s. The first carving away of land was for the high school, and it's a grand structure, and it has served generation after generation of Tacoma students. But it did whittle that park away, and it took a little bit of grandeur away from that park. So if you've been at the corner of 37th and G Street, not too far away from here, this view of the high school is not much changed. But obviously things around it have. And that's the kind of stories that constantly come back in these photographs. The next addition was the statue, which actually just celebrated its centennial. It was built in 1918. This is a great story, which I'll tell only in its short version today. It was actually funded by school children in Tacoma, penny by penny. We're during the end of World War I. It's a difficult economic period of time. The idea was floated to build this statue. A contract was signed with an artist committing the school district to $5,000, which was a lot of money in 1918. No one had a plan for how to pay for it. That sounds familiar. So school children, started by a letter to the editor in the newspaper, it became this drive to raise the money, and it still stands today. I don't actually know if this photograph made it into the book, but it's one of my favorite pictures. The next big development in the neighborhood that again took land away from that park was Lincoln Bowl, which was meant to be an equivalent to Stadium Bowl as a public gathering space for the south end of Tacoma. And it took nearly 20 years for it to be finished. The Depression got in the way. World War II got in the way, taking men away from town to go fight in the war and no construction workers available. So it really was a massive undertaking to get that bowl completed. Now I just would like to share a few stories, things that photographs can teach us. I'm fascinated with how photographs can teach us about why our world looks the way it does. Two stories here. The building on the left you may have seen in the news recently. This is a grand church structure that's you can see it just a few blocks from here, poking out that steeple. It's now threatened. This building may not survive if the church can't figure out the funds to rescue it. This is a picture after a major earthquake in the 1940s, after the steeple had to have some repairs. And then on the right, I had to throw in one of the photographs of the streetcar lines that used to run through our city, which we tore out. And now, of course, we have major debates about putting them back in. All right, and then one quick plug for my other research passion, which is music. One of the great stories I uncovered in researching the neighborhood and the high school was that there was a grand music program at Lincoln High School for many, many decades. And these two photographs both relate to that. The one on the left, when I saw it, I had no clue what the context was. It was in the Tacoma Public Library collection with no explanation. So some research, I managed to find out that that banner that's in the background, it says, Lincoln High School a cappella choir extend greetings and good wishes from Tacoma, Washington, America's evergreen playground. That went on a train that carried singers from Lincoln High School all over the country in 1937, where they were going to participate in a nationwide competition. Grand story, and they're holding daffodils because it took place during an early year of our Daffodil Festival in the 30s, and the students distributed daffodils all over the country. So just a great story. And the choir teacher who developed that program, music teachers have a fond place in my heart, having been raised by one. She developed this program that led to this small high school from Tacoma being the first on the West Coast to go to a national music competition. She also invited Paul Robeson, who you see here, to perform with her choir in Tacoma. This was the first time he performed with a high school choir, a piece that he had been touring the country with, performing with professional choirs. So she was making a few statements with this. She was making the statement, in these days, Lincoln High School was a 95% white school. She was making a statement that her students needed to learn more about people from other backgrounds. And he was a great artist, so her students should have the experience of performing with him. All right, and then one other story. Again, teachers always have a place. The stories of teachers grab my heart. One person, at least, in this picture, I hope you recognize. On the right, we have Nate Bowling, who is a fantastic teacher at Lincoln High School still today. When he was Washington State Teacher of the Year a few years back, had the opportunity to have the picture with Obama. On the left, great story I uncovered, again, just through photographs. I came across this picture by itself like this, didn't know who this person was. And I dug through all the Lincoln High School yearbooks for decades until I found her, because I knew that she somehow had a connection to Lincoln. She was the first African-American teacher hired in the state of Washington. And she was hired to teach math at Lincoln High School. And that was in the 40s. Let that sink in for a second, that nowhere in Washington state did we have any black teachers until the 1940s. But she remained at Lincoln until she suddenly passed in the early 70s and became the head of the math department there. So there's a legacy that Nate is now carrying on at Lincoln. And this is really the theme that came through to me throughout all of my research, is these trends that I've seen residing and being proud of living in this district. They're century-old trends, that these things have not changed, and that this district deserves the same level of respect and attention as others in Tacoma, and so I'm glad to have made that contribution with this book. Thank you.